Welcome to the Investor Fuel Real Estate Investing Show, where I interview the nation's top real estate entrepreneurs, industry leaders, and other amazing entrepreneurs to help educate and inspire you to take your business and your life to the next level. My goal is to add tremendous value to you during every single episode of this show. If you get value, I'd love it if you subscribe on your favorite podcast player, subscribe on YouTube, and my very favorite, please share this with your community so we can impact even more entrepreneurs. Let's start today's show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today is going to be a good one. I've got my buddy Brad Woodall on here joining us. He's a probate expert, and we're going to be talking about why probates are the very best lead. So, Brad, always good to see you. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. Always good to see you. We've known each other for a long time now, and always...
Yeah, we got a lot of history.
That's
Yep.
right.
And so, and I know you're a kind of a fellow marketing nerd, if you will. And so we talk shop a lot on marketing and different lead sources and things like that. And I know that you've kind of gone heavy into probates over the last few years. And so I'm excited to talk about that topic and be able to share that with a lot of folks. I think we're going to have a couple little nuggets that between you and I that we kind of release here that's a little bit of contrarian thought to what a lot of folks think about probate. So this is going to be a good one for those of you who are listening right now. Brad, for anybody that doesn't know you yet or doesn't know you well enough yet, or they think they know you, but maybe they don't know you as well as they thought they did, tell us your backstory a little bit.
Yeah, so I've been at this 10 years now. Kind of started dabbling in 2015 into trying to buy some REOs and foreclosures and stuff like that. Which was a bad time to do that in Atlanta because the hedge funds were always beating you out on the offers. But got me into like direct seller marketing, started doing that in 2016 and was working a corporate job at the time. Eventually in 2018, left a corporate job, left a corporate grind, and been doing deals ever since. Gosh, at this point, I've closed hundreds of deals. I've got a small team here. I'm located in the Atlanta metro market. I live north of Atlanta in Canton, Georgia, but we buy all over North Georgia. And then, got into the probate world, years ago, but then really like niched down onto it a few years ago, probably 2 or 3 years ago, just really decided to put a lot of focus into it. And here I am today. So, yeah.
Awesome. So let's, and Brad, a little, for some of you folks that are listening out there, Brad was actually at the very first Investor Fuel Mastermind meeting and has been a part of Investor Fuel over the years. And so that was where we very first met. Was in the, I think we had a common friend that got you into the group. And so that was, by the way, about 7.5 years ago, if you believe that.
It was November 2017.
Yeah, you know the exact date. Yeah,
I know the date.
And then when we just had our 7-year Investor Fuel anniversary last fall, so I know we're roughly 7.5 years ago. So cool.
Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, because you were at the time you were thinking about leaving your corporate job, and then I think shortly after that you just said, "Yeah, I just quit my job today."
January 2018, I said adios. I think it was January 12th, 2018. I left my corporate job. I put in my notice. I gave him like a 60 days notice after the Investor Fuel meeting. And left January 18th and never looked back, left the golden handcuffs behind.
So. Yeah, that's awesome. So, and now you're like me, completely unemployable. Like they probably couldn't afford you for one, and two, wouldn't want you because you got too many bad habits from their perspective, probably.
That's right. Yeah. But I'm glad I it's funny. My wife works a corporate job still, and she works from home down the opposite end of the house. And some of the stuff I see that she has to deal with, I was like, thank God I don't have to deal with that anymore.
Yeah. Not that we don't have other drama to deal with as entrepreneurs, but it is what it is.
Right.
Yeah. Right. We tolerate it. So let's talk about probate. So, why are probates the best lead and the best kind of source, I guess, in your opinion? Because I know you put a lot of focus on it, and not that anybody out here listening should just go all in on one source and ignore everything else. But probates are your favorites. So tell me why.
Well, first of all, I'm gonna preface this and say, if you're looking for a high volume lead source, probates is not the answer, right? It's sort of a lower volume thing. But from a profit margin perspective, in my experience, they have been my most profitable deals I've ever done. They're a longer life cycle to get the deal closed, and there's a lot more hurdles you got to jump through. Yeah. But the profit margins, in my opinion, are some of the best profit margins of any. And I've done all the marketing methods and the lists, and I've done, you name it, I've done it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And this is what we're going to go over today is you really, you kind of, I'm sure there's plenty of people that have bought houses that were in probate or had been through probate or popped up on a list because they had filed a probate and they didn't have to deal with all of the court system or the family or anything much at all because maybe they had gotten through all that. But I think where they become the most profitable and where you can really separate yourself, which we're going to talk about more today, is if you talk to them early on and you can kind of become that consultant or really like an advisor as to like how to navigate those waters, right? And at that point, it's real if you know what you're doing, and I know you do, and I know you are going to tell us some of that today. You can help people. You basically the competition gets thinned out real fast because you're clearly you become the expert. You can position yourself as the expert on it versus just somebody that wants a house, right? And so, um, yeah. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the probate process. Like, so there's probably some misconceptions that people have about how this even works. And so I think everybody knows what a probate is. Somebody passed away and they
Yep.
need to file probate so that the heirs get what they deserve or whatever, whatever. But there's more to it than that. So maybe kind of tell us some of the misconceptions and kind of high level what it is that will clarify a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. And I want to kind of circle back to what you just said about the competition. And probates are a very heavily marketed lead source,
Right.
but they're on each end of the process. What I have found is the blue ocean, right? So you got the red ocean, and if you've ever read the book, The Blue Ocean Strategy,
Yep.
right? The red ocean is where all the sharks are swimming, all the competition is. And getting them early on is key, and winning their buy-in from the seller and helping them through the process is key, and then also catching the ones on the backside who filed for probate years ago. the
Yep.
the marketers stopped marketing to them 6 months, 12 months ago,
Yep.
and now they're ready to sell because they didn't sell for one reason or another. There was a tenant
Right.
in the property, brother was living there. They just wanted to bury their head in the sand and not deal with it. Different things happen, and the best deals are found on in the blue ocean on either side of the red ocean, in my
Right.
opinion.
Let's come
So
back to
anyway,
that because that's going to be a meaty conversation, I think. Because I've known that for years. Like a
yep,
lot of real estate investors hit them right away, right when the probate's filed, and maybe
yep,
mail to them two or three times, and then they stop. And I'd like to come back to that because there's a lot of I think new information we're going to share with people there on that side that's going to be a little bit eye opening. Might create a bunch of competition for guys like you and me, but that's what we do is kind of share what's working here. But okay, yeah. And so overall of the process, do you want to kind of share just like what the
yeah.
probate process and some misconceptions there, maybe?
Yeah, so obviously, in probate, someone died, right? Someone dies, and in many cases, the family, the heirs of the estate, whoever that may be, generally are going to sell the property. Some of them will keep it, but for the most part, most of them are going to sell it. I would say that at least probably 80% of them are going to sell it the traditional way through a real estate agent, kind of go through that route. And that's why we also kind of tap into the retail side too. I'm an agent. We partner with agents because there's you can monetize the leads still through that
Yeah.
source, right?
Yeah.
But someone dies, they're going to sell it. In order to get to sell it, they've got to go through the probate process. And depending on what state you live in is going to dictate how in depth that process is going to be. Like Mike, you live in Texas. You guys have affidavits of heirship in Texas, which are awesome because it's kind of like, in some cases, it's an easy way sort of around probate, and you don't have to go through that whole process. Versus
Right.
where I live in Georgia, you kind of have to probate everything. And then some states have small estate affidavits, some of them don't. And there's different, but for the most part, I would say the probate process around the U.S. Is probably about 90% the same, and some states have subtle differences in the process. And it could take anywhere from a couple months to a year, 2 years, depending on what state you live in. And the person that the heirs cannot sell that real estate until they have been granted the authority to do so. And that's that's where you go through the probate process to basically get the authority, the executor, the administrator, or whomever gets that authority granted from the courts to say, okay, we've looked at the will, or if there's not a will, all looks good. Okay, you can sell the assets of the estate now and distribute the funds to the creditors. Creditors always get paid first. So
Right.
always remember that. And then distribute money to the heirs. So,
Yeah. And
but it's a
that and,
legal
and
process.
what you just said there is I want to emphasize that is that when somebody files probate, like we're thinking of it as, hey, it's a signal for a real estate investor that maybe where there's smoke, there's fire. Maybe there's somebody that needs to sell a house because of this, right? But I want to
Yep.
point out here that you just said at a high level, but didn't I want to tie it together, is that creditors are also looking at probates because if they have debt, if they own debt, basically medical debt and stuff like that. Now consider that a lot of people, depending on how they pass away, if they're older and they pass away, they usually have a lot of medical. I don't know the numbers on this, but there's something that I've seen before that basically kind of end of life medical expenses for people are like massive, right? Like you don't have a whole lot of medical expenses your whole life for most people, and in that last year or two of your life, especially if you have any of the major ails that kill us, cancer, heart issues, all those things. If you're in the hospital a lot, you basically have a ton of medical debt that's tied to you.
Yep.
And I know because, well, just because I just happen to know, is that when somebody files for probate, that's also a probate is like a notice of default in some ways, right? It's a public
Yep.
announcement that something has happened here. So that's
Correct.
why that's how we get these notifications. You go to the county, or you can buy them through some different sources and stuff. But it's also like a public announcement that something has happened here to go inform the world that if you have any interest in this property or this person or this estate, you better raise your hand now because people are lining up with their hands out to get something. And so that's why this is a process, right? Of like, we might want to buy the house if it truly is in probate and the other spouse is deceased or whatever. Um, then there's a line forming to pay back the debts associated with that person. And one way to pay for those debts is possibly the sale of hard assets, including real estate, right?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. For sure. Yeah, it's a notice to the world that someone died, and it's a process, and it was created to give creditors time. And by the way, depending on the state you live in, like where I live in Georgia, a creditor can open a probate for an estate and be the administrator. They can petition to be the administrator of an estate and open a probate. And obviously it's got to make sense for them to do it. They've got to be owed a certain amount of debt and know there's assets to do it. But they actually in Georgia can do that. In many states they can, and some states they can't. So just
Yeah, I didn't
depends
know
on your
that.
state.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yep.
So, and I have a friend, somebody that you would know, that I have a friend that I got a lead for a probate situation. It's from an old friend of mine, and it's kind of a ways away. So I said, hey, I connected him with a friend of mine to go see if they could buy the house. And sure enough, they're buying the house, but it has to get approved by the judge. And since the person passed, then there was a fire there, and they got insurance. The insurance company's involved, and there's a lot of moving parts there. But I'm pretty sure he's getting the deal, and it'll be a nice juicy one. But it's because he was patient and could kind of hold their hand through the process of making sure that they were getting some of their questions answered. So cool. So let's go ahead. Do you have something else to add
I
there,
was just
Brad?
gonna say, yeah, in order to hold their hand, you really need to educate yourself. If you're gonna get into this niche, you need to educate yourself on and have a good team behind you, right? Good probate attorneys to consult with, real estate attorneys to consult with, divorce attorneys to consult. Like you need a good team of people to help you overcome the hurdles because these are hairy deals. They come with a lot of hair on them, and you need to be either knowledgeable or know someone who is knowledgeable, and then you can help steer that seller through that process because the
Yeah.
more you help them, the more they want to do business with you. And they see that to you it's not just about the property. You actually genuinely want to help them, and you're helping them through the
Right.
process. So
Maybe share some tips on how to stand out there, because obviously most real estate investors are going to come in and they're just looking at the house. They might not even know that the lead that there was a probate, right? I mean, right? There's people that call you to sell their house all the time, and you may not know what their motivations are. And so
Correct.
sometimes, I would say probably the average person that buys a house that went through probate isn't even aware there was a probate. Like they just are a beneficiary of that process that's already happened and they don't know. Right. And
Yep.
so obviously I know you market to probates,
Yep.
probate leads. And I know like with Investor Machine, a probate is one of many data sources that we use to identify. And we actually have a system, when we generate leads for our customers, we can tell them, hey, this has a probate. It has 2 years back taxes. Like we can tell them what data is behind that lead source, but most people don't have that information. And so, how would you know? I mean, I guess are there any tips on how to? I mean, you don't want to just say, "Hey, did you have a spouse that passed away?" Or even you don't really ask that. But how does that come up naturally in your experience if you didn't already know that? Hey, this I used my probate phone number, so I know it was a probate or whatever it might be.
Well, so let's say, for instance, I've gotten a lot of leads, just from SEO for my website that someone died, and through our process we're asking these questions. A lot of time they volunteer it, right? They say, oh, my dad died, or whatever, this was my dad's house, or whatever.
Right.
And then when we hear that, my leads manager, who's worked for me for many, many years, she knows to go down this probate path, and she has all these questions to ask. And to some people that might sound like a lot, but then they quickly realize, they're like, wait a second, these people know what they're doing, because the average investor is not going to ask these up front. We have some scripts that we kind of go down and ask them about
Right.
this and how many brothers and sisters and when did they die and da 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 da. We're like, this is all pertinent information, because these are deal killers too in the REI sales training world, right? These are deal killers, and you need to address them up front. Otherwise, they are going to come back to bite you in the rear end later. So as we do that, we're also winning buy-in from the seller, because they're like, oh, these guys really know what they're doing, right? And so we do that once they talk to us. But then on our marketing too, we're using some things in our copy that kind of helps show us that, or show the seller that we kind of know what we're doing. I change up my copy depending on the month, depending on the list, all that stuff. But I do kind of throw some subtle hints in our copy that help set us apart from other people. And then when they do call us, they're like, "Oh yeah, this they know they know what they're doing."
Yeah.
So
It's almost like, certainly during the last downturn when there was a lot more foreclosure activity, whenever you would hear somebody say like, I don't want to lose my house or anything like that, you could say, well, are you behind on any payments right now? And you kind of, it's almost like there's a decision tree in your call script that when they say this, I go down a different path of kind of questions, or because you're trying to gather information to, obviously help yourself from a sales process
yeah.
perspective and to be able to be a better advisor to that seller, right?
And also going a step deeper into the sales process, they're going to throw out subtle hints to you by you asking questions as to what the real pain points are. Sometimes, because we always ask them, well, why don't you just list it with an agent? That's a question to get them to cue to say, oh, well, because of X, Y, and Z. And then you probe a little bit deeper. And then sometimes it's like, they want to sell this because their pain in the butt brother-in-law is still living in the house and he won't move out. And they're like threatening to sue him. And that's where we come in, is like, well, this ain't our first rodeo with that. Like, we can help you through that. We know how to navigate that, blah, 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 blah. And then we become their advisor to help them get their pain in the butt brother-in-law out of the property. Usually it's just cash for keys. They just want money at the end of the day for the most
Right.
part, right? But providing the solutions and really identifying the real pain points of what they're really going through. Or it's, we had one recently that she's the executor of her mom's estate, but she's the little sister, and her older brothers that are like 10 years older than her still view her as a little sister, even though they're like in their 60s and 50s and 60s, and they like don't trust the sister, but she's technically the one in charge, right? She's the executor and she signs on the dotted line. But we have had to consult with the whole family through this process. We still haven't. I mean, we're still going through this, but we have to communicate with her and the brothers and play that line so that we're stroking her ego and making sure that we're not overstepping our bounds and telling the brothers too much because we know she's in charge. And then the same token, we're playing that game with the brothers, and so it's a balance game, and you just have to
Yeah,
navigate that
yeah.
sometimes.
So let's talk a little bit more about the marketing, and really from the standpoint of, you said, the kind of blue ocean stuff. So
Yeah.
I have lots of thoughts and opinions on the backside, like as the probate kind of ages, if you will, the
Yep.
opportunity that's still there. But you talked about getting to it really early, which would indicate some sort of kind of pre-probate strategy, or because a lot of folks that certainly if they buy probate lists, in theory, they're getting them soon after the probate's filed. But how do
Right.
you get to probates? Well, I know on the investor machine side, we actually, this is going to sound a little morbid, but we analyze the obituaries in
Yep.
every county where we operate. But outside, anything other than that about kind of get to like a pre-probate, or how to get in front of it before everybody else sees it?
So the way I've done that is through my probateresource.com brand, and my probate resource YouTube channel. When someone dies, people enter into a information seeking journey, right? So they are now, because most people they don't have the slightest clue how to go through probate until they have to do it, right?
Right.
And they may only do it once in their life, right? You know, and then so they get on, nowadays they get on the internet to, how long does probate take? How long does this? They start asking all these questions to Google. And that's where we capture them early on. And what I do in a lot of my marketing is a lot of my video content and my probateresource.com brand, which is a sort of a seller facing brand, is there to capture them into my funnel early on while they're in their information seeking journey. We also have some other lead magnets where we have created some pages on our website that just basically link to the probate forms for that state. So if you Google Texas probate forms, we actually have a page on our site with a link to the Texas probate forms. But as soon as I get them on my site, I've pixeled them and I can retarget them with my content. And then I hopefully, as they're further down, because they're not ready to sell yet, right?
Right.
These people, when you catch them early, you have to carry them through their life cycle of when they finally are ready to sell, they'll call you instead of someone else. And
Uh-huh.
that's how we capture them on the front side with, I mean, I've been doing this for years now, probably 2-3 years now, creating all these YouTube videos and blog articles and online content to capture them in. I've done, podcast episodes with attorneys, and we've done state specific legal topics, and all the questions that they might ask Google, we're answering them for them to catch them on the front side.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah. Okay. And a quick question for you. So I'm sure this is all over the board, but how soon after somebody dies is a probate usually filed?
I mean, they can file it the next day if they wanted to.
Right.
Um,
But what's common?
I would say typically. So I actually did some analysis on this year. I built a whole model, and you can go on my site and actually did a video on how to build the model for your own data. You can go buy that course if you want to. But I did a huge analysis on it. I went back and did literally 5 years worth of probate data. I've spent $500,000 in probate marketing to all this stuff over the years. And what I found is that on average, most people are filing within God, what are the numbers? Within the first 60 days, thereabouts.
Okay.
The 0 to 30 day window is a lot less. And then it's actually, I'm sorry, 90 days. So the 60 to 90 day window is the most common time of when they file after their death. Because when
Yeah.
someone dies, when I lost my son last year for 2 months, I was an emotional roller coaster for like,
Yeah.
you don't know which way is up. You got so
Right.
many things to think about, and you don't know what's going on, and you don't even want to you don't even worry about probate until
Right.
you got your head back on your shoulders.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I found that, like, and I analyzed what, like, okay, how many deals did we did? Okay, so 0 to 30 days. If someone filed within 30 days after the date of the death, what is our lead rate? What is our deal rate? All that stuff. We never did any deals for anybody within the first 30 days. Like,
Hmm.
none in 5 years of marketing to this, and
Yeah.
all the stuff. And then you dive into I also found some pockets within there where surprisingly, our deal rate was really low in certain pockets. So in my marketing, I eliminate those pockets where I actually don't market to people if they've filed probate within a certain number of days after the date of the death. I found in my analysis, and I've got a huge data set to analyze it, 60 some odd thousand rows of data, which is a pretty decent sized data set that says, no, the likelihood of a deal is very low for that. So we're not going to spend money on that. And then,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, over time later, there is there are diminishing returns as you go into the future. So,
Sure. Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Because just because somebody dies, like, I mean, if I were to pass away, my wife's not going to sell our house. I mean, she's,
huh,
comfortable there, and it doesn't mean that somebody is going to die. It just means there's some legal issues that kind of have to happen. But
yeah.
yeah. So let's talk about on the backside. So in my experience, and probably yours too, there's a lot of folks that hit them hard after the probate's filed, and but like you said, there's always cases like there's three adult siblings, and there's the shithead brother that's just like, well, I'm gonna move into the house, or was maybe already living there before mom passed away or something, and it's basically like, hey, I'll take care of the house and I'll pay the taxes and stuff. And then like a year later, the other two siblings realize he hasn't paid the taxes and he doesn't have any money. It's not going to happen, right? And by the way, he was going to fix that leak and do all this and that. He hasn't done anything, so we need to get this guy out of here, right? And
Yep.
so there's a lot of that kind of backside, or there's like negotiating medical debt. Like there's a bunch of stuff that just takes months and months and months to kind of work itself out, right? And so maybe share your thoughts on marketing to probates in terms of like the back end of like after most of the other investors have kind of given up because they have ADD and moved on really fast. Um, you know, what are the windows or kind of some things you see on the back end?
So I would say that most investors and real estate agents too are marketing to these probates in the first 6 months, but really the biggest meat of it is in the first 3 months, heavily marketing, and then they start to taper off over time.
Yeah.
And your
Right.
competition goes down after a certain amount of time. So when I analyzed my data, what I found is that our closed deal rate after 6 months went up like a very high percentage because now all of a sudden we have less competition. So we're going on these appointments and we're closing a higher percentage of these appointments than we were on the like earlier pre like 6 month leads because then you got a lot more competition, a lot more offers out there. I tell you one, like we went on an appointment like 2 weeks ago. And this guy was the nicest guy ever. And he was like, I'm a nice guy, so I feel like, I got all these letters and I feel like I need to, give all these people the opportunity to come make an offer on the house. He had 25 investors that he called, 25 people out to the house. He ultimately ended up selling it to the next door neighbor, which I don't think that deal's going to work out. So he's still in our follow
Yeah.
up process there. But 25 people came out to the house,
Wow.
and so you get that piece, and but over time you get as time goes on. Obviously, it costs money to continue to market to these people, right? But with any marketing channel, the consistency of hitting them over and over. So when you do catch them in that moment when they're like, they check their mail and they're like, oh, yeah, I do need to sell mom's house now. Now's probably the time to call these people. Let me call them. We just got a call 2 days ago from a guy. He's like, I got this card from you guys like 2.5 years ago, and it's put in my drawer, and I'm calling you now. I'm ready to sell dad's house.
Yeah,
So,
that's all. You know
so
what I've seen people say too is, and the kind of a key for consistency here is I've seen people that they get, like you said, the first 6 months they get a bunch of mailers, and but there's very few. If you kind of look at it over like a 12 or 18 month period, they'll almost everybody's a little bit different how they look at this, but sometimes they'll like, I got a whole bunch of people I got one postcard from, a whole
yep,
bunch of others I got two or maybe three. But you sent me nine. Like they just kept coming, right? And they're just like they almost in their mind are like, hey, you stuck with me the longest, right? I mean,
yeah,
there's something to be.
yep,
I think people obviously sometimes people are annoyed when we market to them, and we all deal with
sure,
the people that are mad that they're marketed to. And then, of course, it is probate specifically are a sensitive topic.
Yes.
But there's also some people that are just like, I appreciate that I need help, and I appreciate that somehow you knew that and you just kind of stuck with me. And
Yep.
they're like, you're the only person that's been sending me anything for the last 6 months. And so
Yep.
I'm going to award my opportunity to you. Basically, it's a weird thing. It's this reciprocation like thing where
Mhm.
people are like, you stayed with me. I know that sounds weird, but people just
No, it's
they think,
real. Yeah, we've had that. We've had people say that to us so many times that
yeah,
you were the only people that were continuing to mail me. No one else had mailed me anymore. And we went on the appointment and we had no competition. We made an offer. We got the deal. It was like a laydown,
yeah,
And
yeah,
you just got to stay with it. But it costs money to do that, right? I mean, think of the mailers you're
sure,
going to continue to send and all that stuff. We do taper our cadence off over time. After a certain amount of time, we slow it down and we will move to like maybe a 60-day cadence. Once they get out to a certain point, we're like only hitting them like maybe twice a year because it really doesn't matter. Nobody else is hitting them anyways. So,
right, yeah, yeah.
yep.
Brad, so you have a wealth of information on your site. So if folks wanted to kind of learn more about you, what you've got going on, I know you work with other investors too to help them generate leads and become probate experts as well, right? So where do they go to learn more about that?
Yeah, so I've got my probatehouseguy.com website, and I have a YouTube channel for that. So I put out sort of investor and agent focused content on that channel. It's the Probate House Guy channel. You can go to probatehouseguy.com as well. And we offer sort of a partnership program where we will partner with investors and agents. We actually would prefer them to be an investor and an agent, like a hybrid, in the individual markets, because like I mentioned earlier, probate's about 90% the same across the country. So our content, we're kind of capturing all the leads over on probateresource.com, and then they end up over here where we, maybe get a lead in, near you in Texas. And I would rather just work with someone in Texas because having that boots on the ground and going to that belly to belly appointment, especially on probates, is so critical to get the deal because that personal relationship matters with those people. So we'd rather partner with people in the markets. We kind of handle the marketing. We set up a page for you on our site. We run Google ads. We do direct mail. There's different levels of packages we offer. And that kind of helps you get the leads. And then you run with the ball once you get it in your market, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And go from there. So
yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll add those links down below in the show notes as well. So thanks for sharing your probate knowledge with us today, Brad. Always great to see you, buddy.
for sure, man. Good chatting with you, Mike.
Yeah, you too, of course. Everybody, hope you got some good insights on probates today. And there's a lot of lead sources out there, and honestly, the best lead source is probably all of them. You just have to work them all individually. And I think probably one of the best pieces of advice that I can give, I'm sure Brad would agree, is don't work all your leads the same way. Like, be aware, listen if there is a probate situation or a payment situation or any other indicator that you can really specialize that, because most real estate investors out there all sound the same and they're very clear that they just want the house. They're not really trying to help the person. I mean, they might say that they want to help the person, and maybe they do, but you can position yourself as an expert and truly help people if you just become a better listener ultimately. So, but appreciate all you guys. We'll see you on the next show. Thanks for joining us for today's show. You can learn more about the amazing benefits of the Investor Fuel Mastermind community, including surrounding yourself with hundreds of other rock stars, 100% financing on your deals, and members-only discounts from vendors you're likely already using that, as a member of Investor Fuel, will save you more than the cost of your membership. Visit investorfuel.com to learn more. You can also check out the show's notes for access to free resources, how to get access to world-class lead generation, and even how to work with me directly one-on-one. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. See you on the next show.